We're very excited to invite Victoria back. She's back because you asked to have her back, because we loved you last time you were here. And today's program is about self-care, not only for ourselves, but also for our clients, our patients, our family members. So please join me in welcoming Victoria Sciarra. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm so happy to be back again, and thank you, and Marian, thank you for inviting me to come and talk, and the board for having me. So self-care is a big topic, right? Whether, as Paula said, for ourselves, our clients, or patients. And I think that there's a multitude of reasons why people are resistant to practicing self-care, as well as being vulnerable to losing themselves, and what I call it's the disconnection from themselves. And the truth is that we all disconnect. Everybody in this room, we do that. And I think that the underlying reasons for the resistance and the vulnerability to self-care is rooted in trauma. And the definition that I like to use for trauma comes from Asha Clinton, who is the founder of Advanced Integrative Therapy. And she says, and this is in your handout, the definition, she says that trauma are the things that happen to us that are physically or negatively life-changing. And it can be conceptually impact us, physically, psychologically, and or spiritually. And I think these trauma roots are in childhood. And the thing about trauma is that when we're in trauma, we're usually in fight, flight, freeze mode. And everyone knows what that is, right? And I call it a shame attack. The other thing about trauma is that we often there's an energy that happens when you're in fight, flight, freeze. You recognize that from your own experience, right? Well, when that energy gets stuck and doesn't get released, it gets trapped in the neurobiological system and then becomes part of the trauma reservoir from which people pull from when another traumatic situation happens. And as far as the brain is concerned, physical pain and intense social rejection hurt in the same way. The brain does not distinguish between that. And when I think about a trauma continuum, I think about anything from being made fun of because you had buck teeth up to physical and sexual abuse. And I want to give you some of my musings about self-care. First of all, as professionals in the field, I think that one of the greatest gifts we can give our clients or patients or people that we work with is when we sit with them and we witness their pain. And it's the pain of why they lost themselves or disconnected in the first place. And we do that without shaming or judging them. And I think it takes a tremendous amount of compassion and empathy to sit with them day after day and do this. I think we're always modeling self-care and the potential for wholeness simply by our interactions, our communications, and our behaviors. At the same time, I think that motivating people can only go so far, because at some point that person has to make a decision that they want something more, that they decide that they're not going to allow what happened to them or what they did to define them anymore. And they have to make a conscious choice. And the conscious choice is something like, even though all of that did happen, and even though I did do that, I choose, and that's key, I choose to want to know more of myself, and I choose to want to connect. And when I am working with a client with self-care tools, I like to keep them simple and portable. I've discovered that a Post-it note and breath goes a very long way. And I also like to pair a new self-care tool with something that person is already doing. I find that's easier for them to implement. For example, taking a conscious breath when you start the car, taking a conscious breath when you walk through the doorway. Now, I know that everyone breathes, but I'm really talking about being conscious about your breath, paying attention to your breath, pausing for one breath, one moment to do that. And that makes a tremendous amount of difference throughout the day collectively. And if you all started doing that, I think you would find that your stress reduces just a little bit. And my last comment about self-care. In the 25 years, over plus, that I've been in this profession, myself and all of you and others like us have taught me that we are often better about taking care of other people than we are ourselves. Would you agree? Show of hands, would you agree? Yeah. It's just true. It's a fact. So I wanted to make my presentation today experiential because I want to give you an opportunity to take a peek at your self-care pattern. Perhaps there's a place that needs to be tweaked or adjusted, or a place that you could help yourself, support yourself just a little bit differently. And the focus of my presentation today is going to be on three things: shame, negative limited thinking, and the crazy busyness that we get involved in. I think that those three things contribute to the resistance to self-care and the vulnerability. So I want to start first by talking about shame. The definition of shame is in your handout. This is a definition that comes from Brené Brown. And she says that shame is the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love, belonging, and connection. I think that's a pretty powerful statement. And I really like her work. She's done 12 years of research on the topic of shame, men and women. And how many of you have ever heard of Brené Brown? She's phenomenal. She has some excellent things to say about shame. Shame is real pain. And you know, shame happens between people. And shame also heals between people. When we're experiencing shame, we are in that fight, flight, freeze mode, what I call a shame attack. It's one of the most primitive emotions that we feel, and it makes us feel alienated, isolated, alone, and inadequate. Would you agree? Yeah. And the other thing is we all have it. It's not easy to talk about. Sitting with the people that you work with, it's difficult for them to talk about it, isn't it? And because it's difficult to talk about, that is what drives us. So this is the first part of your work, making this experiential. I want to invite you to think about, on the shame scale from your history, a scale of 1 to 10, something 1 to 3. We all have those little times in our lives where something has happened that we feel shame. So what I'd like you to do is to just sit back, take 3 breaths. So we're going to be doing a lot of breathing today. As Paula knows, I like to do activities. So if you would, just uncross everything, take everything off your lap just for a moment. And either close your eyes or lower your eyelids, at least create an environment or so you can be internal. And if you would just breathe in through your nose, letting your tummy fill up like a balloon, breathe out through your mouth, letting your belly flatten against your spine. And just do that 2 or 3 times. I'd like you to be able to just settle into your body. Everybody rushing to get here. And when you feel like you're settled in, bring to mind a tiny shame experience from your history, and then write that down on the piece of paper. First of all, does everybody have the handouts and a pen? Mike, do you have one? Do you have a pen? Okay. So just jot that down. This is not anything that you're going to be sharing. It's for you to work with today and maybe later. There might be something in there that you need to take care of for yourself. Everybody got something? Okay. Let me tell you a story about Ginger. So Ginger was referred to me by her chiropractor because she was having suicidal ideations. And when she came in, she told me that she was feeling pain and intense shame. She thought that she had violated and compromised all of her values by getting involved with a married coworker. That affair had recently been discovered. There was a possibility that she was going to lose her job. She was being shunned by, she said, all of her coworkers, and the guy wasn't going to lose his job. As I was taking her history, what she told me was that she was in a 20-year marriage, living a very affluent lifestyle, to a man who was an alcoholic and abused her. She'd raised 2 sons with him, and when the sons were in high school, she got enough courage to leave. She moved in with her mother in a 2-bedroom house, put herself through college, got a job in her chosen career, got very busy her life in raising her sons. And then 2 years ago, her ex-husband killed himself. The sons inherited the house, the big beautiful house. She moved back in and she got very busy again, remodeling and redecorating the house. And then about 6 months ago, she began the affair. And it's interesting, she could see no, oh, by the way, I was the first person she'd ever told any of this to. She didn't see any connection between what happened in her past and the intense pain that she was experiencing right now. She was troubled because she was having suicidal thoughts and she didn't have the energy to be busy. So I made the appropriate referral to a psychiatrist and she got on medication and she was feeling better and she didn't want therapy. She just wanted to get back to her busy life. I felt badly because I felt like I lost her, and she's one of those people that really needed help. She wanted to get back to being busy, to living her life, to looking for a job, doing her, being involved in her organizations. So when I was mentioning to you like some bullet points about shame, can you pick out in Ginger's story any key points? So, for example, she was feeling shunned by her coworkers, so she was feeling rejected, isolated, alone, alienated, right? She also, so when you think about fight, flight mode, where was she? Fight, flight, or freeze? Flight. She wanted out of here. Exactly. And she kept it a secret. All these years, she kept her life a secret. And she didn't have what I consider true shame resilience. Busyness is what kept her resilient. So she didn't really have anything to fall back on. And shame resilience is the antidote to experiencing shame. And shame resilience is about coming through a shame attack, coming out the other end with more compassion, more connection, and more courage than you had going in. She didn't get any of those. She just wanted medication, which was okay. That's where she was. But she didn't have resilience to help her feel whole. And feeling whole is an outcome. of developing shame resilience. When we're in the midst of a shame attack or that fight, flight, freeze mode, our rational thinking brain is offline. So when I'm working with a client who I see in the middle of this shame attack, the first thing that I want to do is get their rational thinking brain back online, right? That just makes logical sense. The quickest way I know to do that is by having them take 5 conscious breaths. And here we go, the breathing again. And this 5 conscious breath technique is even used in the military with vets with PTSD. So I want to describe it to you, and then I'd like to invite you to do it with me so that you get a sense of what that feels like. It's very simple. You inhale through your nose, letting your belly fill up to a count of 5. You hold your breath to a count of 5, and then you exhale, letting your belly flatten against your spine, exhaling through the mouth to a count of 5. And you do this 5 times. So will you play with me and experience this? Your day's going to be so much better because of this breathing this morning. Okay? So again, going back to just closing your eyes or lowering your eyelids, whichever feels comfortable for you. I want you to create an internal environment for yourself. And I'll count you in. So inhaling, 2, 3, 4, 5. Holding, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale through your mouth, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breath 2. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. And hold, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhaling through your mouth, 2, 3, 4, 5. Inhaling, 2, 3, 4, 5. Holding, 2, 3, 4, 5. And exhaling, 2, 3, 4, 5. Inhaling, 2, 3, 4, 5. And holding, 2, 3, 4, 5. And one more time. Inhaling, 2, 3, 4, 5. And hold, 2, 3, 4, 5. Keeping your eyes closed. Go inside and just do a little body scan internally. Notice what you notice after taking those 5 breaths. Notice if you feel like you're sitting in your body just a little bit deeper, occupying your own skin. Notice if you feel more contact with the chair that you're sitting in. Notice if your head feels a little quieter. And then gently open your eyes, and hopefully no one fell asleep. So did you notice any difference after you took the 5 breaths? Would anyone be willing to share what they noticed? Susan?
I felt more empty.
More empty. Okay. And any particular place? Any particular place that you notice feeling more empty?
Inside my core.
Inside your core. Okay, great. And I see a head nodding there. Anything else?
My brain went numb.
Your brain went numb in a good way, I hope.
Oh yeah, it was really nice. Actually, everything stopped.
Everything stopped. 5 breaths, right? 5 breaths. So people get out. They interrupt the fight, flight, freeze with that. So now they're online and they can think rationally. So the next thing that you want to do, and I think this is on your handout, is you want to begin to help them recognize the shame triggers and understand those. So the way that I look at that, and this is taken from Dr. Linda Hartling's work. She looks physically, mentally, emotionally, and behaviorally. What happened that I ended up in this shame attack? So physically, think about, go back to your shame example, take a look at it. Physically, what happened for you in that shame example? And write that down. So physical things can be like, I feel like I was punched in the stomach, I lost my breath, my heart was racing. I started sweating. Could be anything like that. So go ahead and write that down. What was your physical experience? Because this is what you want to be able to help clients get to, so they can really begin to understand their shame. Okay. The next thing that we want to look at is emotionally. So what were the emotions? In that shame example that you wrote down, what were your emotions? And again, this is what you want to help your clients identify. And in the beginning, sometimes people are unaware of what their emotions are, so I just keep it simple with the basics. Mad, sad, glad, afraid, ashamed, hurt, pain. Letting them choose from that and using that as a step to bridge so that they can get to other emotions, but keeping it very simple. So writing down your emotions in that example. The mental piece I'm going to put on the side. We're going to take a look at that in depth when we look at the 10 thinking errors. So we'll move to behavioral. There's 3 behaviors that happen in a shame attack: moving toward, moving against, and moving away. So moving toward behavior looks like trying to please and appease, trying to get acceptance and approval from the person that you feel shamed with. Moving against is using aggressive behavior to try to get power over that person. A really good example of that is sending a shaming email or text as a respond. Emails and texts are tools of our trade these days. So that's something that commonly happens. You get something and you don't like it, and so you send back a shaming response. The third one is the moving away. So moving away has to do with silencing ourselves, hiding, keeping secrets. Like from Ginger's story, remember she kept a secret of all those years of being abused. So again, back to your example, when you look at that example, those behaviors, moving toward, moving against, moving away, what did you do? And sometimes people do a couple.
What's making a joke?
Making a joke?
Is that moving towards a way of trying to please, or? Yeah,
You're certainly not showing that you're upset.
right.
And you're not hiding
Right.
because you're staying engaged.
Right.
You're just trying to make light of it, make fun. Okay, any other questions about that piece of information or anything that I've said so far? Okay, is this making sense to you? Okay, so the next step then, okay, so they're out of, you've interrupted the fight, flight, freeze. You are helping them understand what they do physically, emotionally, and behaviorally. The next piece then, help them figure out the words and the messages that trigger the shame attack. So for Ginger, the message was she wasn't good enough. The other guy gets his job, she loses hers, and that she's rejected. So those are the kinds of messages, even though no one came up to her and said, I reject you, they shunned her. And that is rejection. It's social rejection. So when you look at your example, what were the words or messages that triggered your shame attack? What are the words and messages that are triggering for you when you have a shame attack? And we tend to have sort of some default places that we go, like people tend to be sensitive to not being seen and heard. That would be a trigger. I'm saying something and you're trying to talk me out of my feelings. That can be a shame attack. You're saying I'm bad or wrong for having these feelings. That could be a trigger for a shame attack. So that kind of an example. So whatever might be yours, and I know that you know them, so go ahead and write those down. What words or messages are triggering for you? Maybe it's a look from someone. Maybe it's a gesture. I don't know, but I know that you know. Okay, so now you've got the words and the messages. You want to help your client create a list of loving and respectful words that they could substitute in the shame attack. Like, I'm human, I made a mistake. Or, I'm not bad. I'm not a loser. I didn't understand the question. I'm not stupid. Those kinds of things. Simple little things, even if they're just 2 or 3 words, but something that can be pulled out of the file and immediately put in there. And again, thinking about your shame example, what words would feel loving and respectful to you that you would like to be hearing from yourself when you're in a shame attack? And go ahead and write those down. And under shame resilience, the last piece is you want to encourage the person to reach out to someone that they trust and tell their shame story. And often you may very well be the first person that hears that story. And remember, I said shame happens between people. It also heals between people. Shame cannot survive in an environment of empathy and understanding. It cannot. It cannot. It melts it. So telling your shame story is very important. And one of the things that I've discovered also in telling the shame story, like for Ginger, it was important for her to own, I participated in this affair willingly. She needed to own her part in it. She did it. She wasn't coerced. She wasn't forced. She was a willing participant. So it's really important. It's very empowering to say, yeah, I did this. That doesn't make me a bad person, and I did it. So when you think about your, back to your shame example, who did you tell about what happened in that shame example? And if you didn't tell anyone, who would you tell now? Who would you tell now? And if you had a part in that example, what was it? Write that down too. And maybe you didn't. But if you did, it gives you a chance to look at that. You know, sometimes we have a situation that we don't own a part in and it kind of hangs around. And we can feel guilty about that or bad about that. So it's an opportunity to clear the slate. And then the next part is emotion. So you've already written down your emotions. The person you're working with has already written down their emotions, but that's an important piece. So how'd you feel then? And the next piece is when that person is telling their shame story, what do they want from the person that they're talking to? What do they want? They just want you to listen? Do they want some specific help? And I'm going to give you an example of that in a minute when I tell you the next story. But what did you want? What did you want in your example that you wrote down? What would you have wanted that you didn't ask for or that you did ask for? So I want to tell you a story about Julie. Julie is a successful business owner going through a divorce. And when she came to my office, she had just gotten several hours before off the phone with her attorney. The attorney had asked her to get some financials from her accountant, which she did do. She got the information, gave it to the attorney. What she didn't do was look over the information before she passed it along to the attorney. The attorney found some error, I don't know what that was, and had phoned Julie to tell her how irresponsible and incompetent she was for not catching the error. And Julie was in a shame attack, right? Feeling very scolded, very shamed, and told me that. And what she wanted from me, because she had started preparing an email as a response, she wanted my help to finish off this email. So she asked for what she wanted. So of course the first thing we needed to do was get her out of we needed to interrupt the fight, flight, freeze response, right? So we did the breathing. She got her thinking brain back online. We're looking at the words and the messages and what's going on physically and emotionally and behaviorally. And then we took a look at the email. And in the email, she had aligned herself with the attorney, stating, I'm not good with numbers. I'm pretty dumb, actually. I barely made it through high school. I dropped out of college, and I don't know how I managed to run a successful business. That was her email that she wanted me to help her finish. So we talked about that a little bit more, and I had her look at her thinking errors. And the email that she actually wrote was one thanking the attorney. My first order of business would have been to fire the attorney, but she wanted to send an email. Okay, so it was thanking the attorney for finding the error. She said that she had made an oversight by not looking at the material. She was emphatic about using the word oversight. She made an oversight, and that she didn't believe that that oversight warranted being spoken to in that way. And if that happened again, she would no longer work with the attorney. So she had to set a boundary with her. That's an example of shame resilience. She came out of that shame attack feeling more connected, feeling more courageous, feeling more compassion towards herself than she did going in. Okay? Any questions about that? Fight, flight, freeze, where was she?
Five.
Moving, so behaviorally, moving toward, moving against, moving away. Absolutely moving toward. She wanted that attorney's approval. Okay. So now let's talk about limited or negative thinking. You have this in your handout, page 2 and 3, I believe. There's 10. Good old Dr. David Burns. Been around for a long time. I like what he says. So there's 10, and so thoughts are the equivalent of construction tools with which we build our reality. And we know that our reality gets formed early on in childhood and with trauma. I haven't said this before, so I'll say it now. When we're in fight, flight, freeze, the limbic system is hijacked. Rational brain is offline. Limbic system is where the fight, flight, freeze happens. You can't get to rational brain when you're in fight, flight, freeze. So it's hijacked. And in our clients, as a result of thinking errors, we see victim languaging, we see self-sabotaging behaviors, we see low self-esteem, insecurity, inadequacy, all of those things. When I'm working with thinking errors with the client, and I will say that cognitive shift, the cognitive shift piece, I find the most difficult, because even brain training programs tell us that cognitive shifts take a long time, and they happen over time, and it takes a lot of persistence and perseverance to keep at these cognitive these thinking errors. And a lot of times clients will say, well, I don't believe that. I don't think that could be true. And I always say it's not a requirement that you believe it, I just want you to start saying it. It's like in AA, they have that fake it till you make it slogan, and it really does begin to sink in at some point if you use it. So let's take a look at the thinking errors. Oh, and I encourage my clients to check in throughout the day to what they're thinking. They are shocked at how negative they are. How many of these 10 thinking errors are actually in operation? So is everyone pretty familiar with these thinking errors? Polarized thinking, overgeneralization, mental filter, discounting the positive, catastrophizing, mind reading, emotional reasoning, should statements, labeling, and personalization and blame. Has everyone found them? Okay. So again, back to your example. What I'd like you to do is look at these 10. Where's your default? And again, most of us fall regularly into a few of these 10 places. I sort of don't like to use the word favorite, but that's really what happens. It's our programming, that how we were trained, how we learn to look at life, because what we learned early on from the messages, they become facts as kids, and we carry those into our adult lives, and people get different messages. So of these 10, which ones are in your file? And just write those down. Okay, so now let's move into the antidote for this negative, limited thinking. One of the things that I notice with my clients, you probably do with yours, there's a lot of overcommitting.
A lot of what?
Overcommitting. And so I teach clients, when someone asks them to do something, there's 3 responses: yes, I'll get back to you, or no. And I tell them no is a complete sentence. You don't have to explain why you don't want to do something. And so many people believe that they have to tell, and they'll even make up a lie, but you don't have to tell anybody why you're not doing it. And that seems to be helpful. The other thing that I think is an antidote for the negative, limited thinking has to do with gratitude. I think people don't often spend enough time in thinking about what they're grateful for. And for people who do think about what they're grateful for, they don't connect that with the body. And so those of you who know me know I'm very big on the mind-body connection. So I'd like you to play along with me, and I'd like to show you what this feels like. So when you are teaching your clients, you know. So I'd like you to think about, well, actually just kind of sit back in your chair. Take 3 breaths. You've been doing a lot of listening, so your brain is very active. So uncross everything. That really does help for the energy flow in the body, and it's often hard to uncross legs. We have the habit of doing that. So just uncross and just take 3 breaths. In through your nose, same way we've been breathing. Out through the mouth, closing your eyes or lowering your eyelids. And keeping your eyes closed while we're doing this. And bring to mind just one thing that you feel grateful for. And think about that. Just one thing. Notice what happens in your body as you think about that one thing. Now what I'd like you to do is to take 3 more breaths. In through your nose and out through your mouth. Perhaps feeling like you can settle just a little bit deeper in your body. Feel more connection with the chair that you're sitting in. And go back to the one thing that you're thinking about that you feel grateful for. And I want you to drop into your body. So bring your awareness below your neck. Find in your body the sensation that connects with that thought of gratitude. So what does gratitude actually feel like? Not emotionally, but the sensation of gratitude in your body. Where is it? And breathe into that sensation wherever it is. Really let yourself feel the sensation of feeling gratitude. And if that sensation is not already in your heart, with your next breath, imagine that you can move it there. Moving the sensation of gratitude to your heart. And you actually can put your left hand on your heart. Breathing in. Feeling the sensation of gratitude. And then when you're ready, open your eyes slowly and gently. Did you notice any difference between just thinking about it and thinking and feeling it? Did anyone notice a difference? You could notice the difference?
When I thought about it, like I started smiling, so physically I felt it in my face, and then when you started asking where else in the body, I felt it kind of in my core, like a warmth.
Anyone else? Yes.
I actually felt it as when I tried to describe it as a mushiness in my heart. It was a nice feeling.
It was a nice feeling. So, was it a nice feeling to do that? That didn't take very long. You could give yourself that nice feeling anytime during the day, just taking a moment to pause. Think about what you feel grateful. From brain research, we know that connecting up with gratitude, connecting up the thought, the mind, with the body for 20 seconds is good for the brain.
I have a feeling it'll work really good with some of my clients. I think they're going to fall asleep because it's so relaxing.
It is relaxing. So make it 20 seconds. Don't make it a long time. Make it 20 seconds. There's kind of a softness that happens, right? When you allow yourself to really connect up with the sensation. What else do I want to tell you? Okay, so now, I wanted to tell you about that. We're going to talk about conscious breathing and meditation. So we already know about interrupting the fight, flight, freeze response by taking those 5 breaths, right? So that's one of your antidotes. I use breathing as a self-care tool. I keep it, as I said, simple and portable. I'll even write on a Post-it note the word breathe. I might write it on 5 Post-it notes and hand them to the client. Eckhart Tolle says one conscious breath is a meditation. I like that. Everybody has a minute, right? Everyone has a minute. And we spend a lot of minutes every day waiting. We wait in line, we wait online, we wait at the stoplight. So again, this is pairing something like breath with something that you already do, all that waiting. And it's cumulative. If throughout the day, if you're taking a minute pause and really breathing and connecting, you're going to feel a whole lot better at the end of the day. This piece is one of the easiest pieces in terms of self-care I have found that my clients will do. They can integrate it, they can implement it very easily, simply because we breathe, and then it's just getting them to focus on the breathing. I think it's so important for people to learn to breathe for themselves. And I actually use those words. Take a breath for yourself. And sometimes I get big eyes, like deer in the headlights eyes. And they do that, and then I'll say, can you take another? And they find that so freeing to have permission to breathe for themselves. And I'm okay if the only time they do this self-care stuff is in my office, because I know I've got 50 minutes with them every week, and that's going to make a difference. Also, I found that clients who are uncomfortable feeling sensations in their body, and there's a lot of people like that, they can tolerate just focusing on their breath. So again, it's a bridge to build from. Just focus on your breath. Focus on your breath. And with my meditation students, sometimes when they first come in, they can't feel any sensations in their body, and it's like, okay, focus on your breath, because they can do that. At the nose, at the chest, at the belly, you give them little prompts. Okay, yeah, okay, I can feel my belly moving. It's very helpful. So 5 conscious breaths, you know. The main, Dr. Andrew Weil has a breath for anxiety. Excuse me, it's called the 478 breath. On the bibliography in your handout, I've given you that website. This is a very effective breath to teach clients to help reduce their anxiety. But the main thing, we'll do that if I have time at the end, I want to make sure that I teach you your portable meditation breath. So what that means simply is you breathe for 1 minute. I'm going to count. I'm going to time that. And you're going to count. So inhale, you're just going to say a number. So on the inhale, you'll say 1. On the exhale, you'll say 2. On the inhale, you'll say 3. On the exhale, you'll say 4. And you'll keep counting until I ask you to stop. And you can teach this to your clients. When you're out, anywhere, if you count that number, you have meditated for 1 minute. That's kind of exciting, isn't it? And then people get excited. Oh, I can do this for 1 minute. Maybe I can do it for 2 or 3. You know, it's just something, it's motivating, something to get them going. And then at some point they have to choose if they're going to implement this into their lives. So again, I'm going to have you take things off your lap, closing your eyes or lowering your eyelids. And when I say start, okay, so I got to get over here so I can see the clock. Does everyone have things off their lap? Get comfortable, feet on the floor, legs uncrossed, hands on your lap, palms down, eyes closed or eyelids lowered. Start counting. And stop. And write that number down. Typically what happens if you do this several times in a row, that count will go down. Because as you get more relaxed, as you feel more in your body, your breath is going to be slower. Does that make sense? So this is your portable meditation minute that you're starting with. And you can practice this anytime, anywhere. When you think about the tools that for self-care that I presented, you can really practice them anywhere. Any questions about the breath, about anything I have said? Yes, Jean.
Is that breath supposed to be in through the nose, out through the mouth also, or it doesn't matter?
In through the nose, out through the mouth. So I see I have about 4 minutes before I end, and I want to.
We actually have till 9:30.
We have. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to give time for questions too. Thank you. So I want to wrap up with reminding all of us that the journey from loss of self to wholeness is something that occurs over time. A lot of persistence, a lot of perseverance, a lot of patience and empathy on our part. People making a conscious choice not to be defined by what happened to them or what they did, but that they want to know more about themselves. They want to feel more whole so they can live fuller, richer lives, which everyone has a right to do. And I believe that practicing self-care, even for a minute, makes a difference. It is so empowering just for a minute, just to pause and notice what's going on. And to interrupt those vulnerabilities to resisting self-care and the disconnection from self. Remembering that it includes shame, thinking errors, and being so busy trying to survive that you don't notice what's going on. Let's see what I'm going to tell you. I have the bibliography I mentioned that's attached with the meditation flyers, and I have a CD at the back. Before I take your questions, and I hope you will have some, I want to read you a passage from my favorite children's story, The Velveteen Rabbit, written in 1922 by Marjorie Williams. I see some heads nodding.
What was the title?
The Velveteen Rabbit. And the first time I heard this passage was in the 80s. Oh my goodness. In the 80s, I was at a conference on domestic violence. Alice LaViolette, which I'm sure all of you have heard of, was the speaker. And she read this passage, and it made me weep. I think that this passage is a metaphor for wholeness. So this is how it goes. Real isn't how you were made, said the skin horse. And maybe this is familiar to you. Yes. I will project my voice. Let me stand out here. Okay. So real isn't how you're made, said the skin horse. It's a thing that happens to you. When a child loves you for a long, long time, not just to play with, but really loves you, then you become real. Does it hurt? Asked the rabbit. Sometimes, said the skin horse, for he was always truthful. When you are real, you don't mind being hurt. Does it happen all at once, like being wound up? So there were toys in the playroom, he asked. Or does it happen bit by bit? The skin horse replied, it doesn't happen all at once. You become. It takes a long time. That's why it doesn't often happen to people who break easily, or who have sharp edges, or have to be very carefully kept. Generally, by the time you're real, most of your hair has been loved off, and your eyes drop out, and you get loose in the joints, and very shabby. But these things don't matter at all, because once you're real, you can't be ugly, except to people who don't understand. So we have 10 more minutes, and I would love to hear your questions. Anything that wasn't clear? Yes.
So I have a question that's sort of taking this too far. How do you deal with people who embrace self-care very much, but never make the choice to move beyond the trauma, that they actually define themselves by all of the ways that they need self-care? So they breathe, they meditate, they relax, they get massages, and they still don't make that choice to move beyond the traumas that cause them shame. How do you deal with that in your practice?
Okay, so I will zone in on the thinking errors.
The what?
Thinking errors, those 10 thinking errors, I will focus on that. And, you know, when I started in this profession years ago, I had this very idealistic idea that everybody wanted to be whole, that everybody wanted to be in charge of their own lives. And it was a brutal realization that that's not true. At least that's been my experience.
Could you say a little more about that?
Well, I think that some people want to be taken care of, and they don't want to take care of themselves. So you're looking at like personality disorder issues. And I have found that not everyone wants to make that choice, and they have a right not to do that. They have a right to not want to take care of themselves, because I think as humans we have the right to do that. My job is to give them the tools that I have, and I think when you are in this profession long enough, you have to let go. You really have to let go. You can, you know, I'm not God. I can only teach them what I know and be there for them with compassion and empathy and connection and all of that. And then I have to let go and be able to trust them to do with the information whatever they're going to do. If they keep coming back to me, I see that as positive. And I'm very careful about not creating a dependent relationship with someone who wants to be taken care of. I don't hold anybody accountable for anything. I leave that up to them. So that's a great question, and that sometimes you can only do so much. But I would definitely go with the thinking errors. Any other questions? Yes.
I apologize if this doesn't have a lot of applicability to everybody, but a few of us work in a medical setting, and your stories really reminded me of our work. The first one, Ginger, being the fact that we may only get a couple or one opportunity to make an intervention happen. The second, the attorney talking to the woman, reminded me of how a lot of our doctors talk to our patients about their health. I work with diabetic youth.
Yeah, it's like this.
So I wonder if you just have any advice on, you know, what's one thing, the breathing obviously would be one thing that we could teach. I work with teenagers. I almost want to empower them to lecture the physicians, and, you know, or what can we share with physicians or other disciplines who maybe don't get it?
Oh,
like
yes,
we do?
with
I don't know if
physicians.
you could comment on that.
Well, for empowering your clients, so breathing, absolutely, because they probably go into a shame attack when they're being scolded. So the breathing to get out of the shame attack as soon as they can. The other thing is the cognitive errors, the thinking errors. So being able to help them notice what are the triggers for them, and then what they want to put in place of that. So while the doctor's sitting there, if they can't get words out to advocate for themselves, then as soon as they get a private moment to say to themselves, I'm doing the best I can. And if they could say to the doctor, this is not helpful. I mean, in an ideal world, to be able to say that, this isn't helping me. It's making me feel badly about myself. Wouldn't that be empowering? Does that give you some tools to work with?
Do you have any suggestions how we might explain this to other disciplines, like this whole idea of shame attack? I mean, that's going to sound so new age.
So the fight, flight, freeze, scientific. There's scientific research behind that. The limbic system. Talk to them about the brain, neurologically what happens in a medical setting. They're going to get it. There's a lot of research about how the limbic system gets hijacked, and that's not new agey. It really is scientifically proven, right? And that it puts the person in a position to go into fight, flight, freeze. They feel like they're under attack.
Yeah.
And they feel shame. So separate those words. Don't put it together, and I won't sound new agey. When you say to somebody that they're screwing up, that makes them feel shame, and they feel attacked by you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes. So you can just say it that way. helpful? Yep. Okay. Someone back there had their hand up.
Oh, well, I do.
Oh, well, hi, Mary.
I mean,
And then Mike.
or to talk to the teenagers, if you only see them once or twice, I mean, I just think, well, for them to stand up to a doctor to say that, I mean, I really think the best way to go is to have an in-service with the doctors and say, you know, many of our clients have said this, and I'm wondering if we could, you know, help you to understand how that feels to them. So that's just my opinion. But I would like to put a plug in for you and then kind of a plug in for me in that the sexual assault, you know, awareness approach. Last night I had a client who came, first time saw her, and she said she was diagnosed with bipolar from 2 different therapists years ago. So going on, I'm thinking she doesn't really seem bipolar, but da-da-da-da-da-da. I asked her, have you ever been sexually assaulted? She kind of looks at me like, and then she starts telling and more and more and more. And she says, I have never told anyone. And then everything she says, you know, makes sense in that framework. You know, the paranoia, always looking around, all this stuff. It totally just like went together. She said, nobody has ever said this to me before. Because I said to her, you make sense. She said, I have never heard those words before. Anyway, at the very end, I mean, it was a hugely intense session and for the intake. And I'm thinking, I got to do something for this girl before I send her out. And so I did the breathing exercise that you taught me years ago at your meditation thing. And
they need to be tough because the things that they do are tough things. And so they come in usually really extremely well defended. Issues related to family struggles, problems with their marriage or their family, their children. And yet the traumatic event, that's no, sure, we deal with that all the time. And they're just so well defended that even touching it, it's just, you know, it's like almost a red badge of courage. I got through it. Do you have any suggestions? I mean, I'm helpful with them in terms of the current relationships, but I know underneath there's a tremendous amount of pain that never gets addressed because they're just so well defended. And, you know, tough guys,
Yeah.
John Wayne's. You know.
Right.
Any ideas?
Well, I love it when I make my male clients cry. Because then I know that I've touched their heart.
Yeah,
And I've touched the
I
pain.
get that. But it's
So,
still, yeah,
for me,
I get there.
because I'm a mind and body therapist, I will do whatever I can in each session to have them connect with their body. Because first of all, they have to trust that they can be in their body and not fall apart. When you're a tough guy, you can't fall apart. So there has to be some trust inside that I can feel this pain and walk out of this office and know that I'm going to be okay and go back to my life. So I have them do explorations. I have them just scan inside their body. I would start with the breathing and have them notice their chest and their belly, because you're just breathing and you're just noticing. And I may spend the whole session doing that and talking about what that feels like. Can you feel your feet on the floor? Can you feel the support? So that they really they're sort of developing a rapport with their body that they do not now have. And they're so busy trying to survive that they can't notice. Does that make sense?
Kind of.
So ask me another question, I'll see if I can make it more sense.
No, a lot of these guys are going to think that's kind of a silly thing.
So what would they
do.
think that's not silly? In terms of
what's happening to them currently in terms of feeling out of control of a relationship.
what does out of control feel like in your body? So I would talk to them, there's a connection between the mind and the body. When you think that you're out of control, there's a feeling in the body that corresponds to that. I wonder what that feels like for you. I would be very neutral. Any idea what that feels like? Oh, you want to know? I can help you with that. So I keep it very simple. Oh yeah, there was she disappeared.
We have to wrap up.
Oh,
I don't know how long your question's going to be.
Darn it.
I know.
It's okay.
You know what?
You can
Before I
catch me
leave the
after.
room,
I'll stay.
let's do 2 more quick questions. Is that okay?
Just wondering if you could.
I just wanted to go somewhere Michael comes, because this is the whole point to me. I'm helping people to understand that the physical part is very valid. And I use an article by a professor from Harvard, okay, who just talks about what happens to the body when you breathe. The physical things that happen to the body. And when people understand that, they are more willing to entertain the fact that they're going to feel better because it has a physical base. The people that Michael is talking about are very physicalized, but they don't translate the fact that when they breathe, this muscle relaxes, the sensory system relaxes, and it's all about the physical part, relating it to the mental part, so that makes the bridge for them, and they get the question answered.
The mind-body connection.
Mind-body connection.
And of course, if it comes from someone from Harvard, then people are going to say, "Oh, well, this must be true."
Sorry, Beth. You got overlooked.
Just wondered if you could briefly describe Dr. Weil course.
Breath. Yes. So his.
Let me
I will
say,
catch you after.
If anybody needs to, because we have to close the meeting so that people can leave if they need to leave. And then since they're not throwing us out of this room, the reason we're in here is because we needed to be out of that room promptly, but they didn't tell me we needed to be out of this room.
Very simple. You will inhale through your nose to a count of 4. So how about if we just do that? Inhale to a count of 4. Inhale through your nose. Hold to a count of 7. Exhale through your mouth to a count of 8, making a. And you do that 4 times. It's really good to do that when you wake up in the morning and before you go to bed at night. And it really does work. So it's inhaling through the nose, 4, holding to a count of 7, exhaling through the mouth, making a noise. Really letting your belly flatten against your spine. And the video, Dr. Weil demonstrates this on the video. It's a great breath.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great summer.